Good morning, afternoon, or evening to you all. For today's lesson, we are going to take an in-depth overview of the reading process. The most important thing to learn from the theme of today's lesson is that reading is a cyclical process that occurs in phases that go back and forth and overlap with each other. So let's eliminate our old ideas that reading is something that you do one time from beginning to end, and then after that's over, you suddenly comprehend and understand the full content. No, instead, let's grow our perspectives on reading to understand it as a process that goes back and forth in cycles. During this lesson, we will cover a few topics, so make sure that you are taking notes. And if you are the official note taker for any DSS note taking that has been established in this course, please be sure that your notes are clearly legible so that you can share them with our student in need. In this lesson, we will learn reading topics such as pre-reading, which is where we prepare ourselves for the reading experience, scan the text, and pre-search through the text, followed by reading, which is where we practice active and responsive reading by doing annotations, and by asking ourselves rhetorical questions to guide us through the reading process. And finally, rereading, through which we scan back through what we have and we look over our note-taking that we may have done so that we can be prepared to engage with the text. So follow along with these topics, and remember, at any point, pause the video, rewind the video, use the lesson discussion space below as a place to ask questions, ask for further clarifications, or just share any ideas that pop through your head. So let's begin to dig into these details that can better help us understand strategies to approach the entire reading process. First, getting prepared. Preparations for your mind and your body, as well as your space and your time. Mind and body preparations. Before you begin reading, take a moment to set the pace. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. You've been running through your day, doing whatever you've been doing, and now it's time to transition into a reading state of mind. Stretch out your neck, stretch out your back. Be sure that you're not bringing a lot of tension and frustration and anxiety into the reading experience. And then, when your body is ready, focus in on the instructions of the reading prompt or the instructions of the writing assignment that you are about to complete. Many times in college, we read not for pleasure, but for business, where we are getting ready to engage in this text in a specific way that your teacher has told you about in advance. So prepare your body and then prepare your mind to focus. Next, you will want to make preparations for your time and your space. First, begin by getting ready to annotate or engage in the reading. If you're reading from a PDF or a web page, you may need to print out that material in a hard copy so that you can use pen, pencil, highlighter, etc. If you prefer a paperless experience, you can create a free account on Hypothesis, which is the tool that we integrate into our Canvas classroom. And it is a free tool for anybody in the world to use, where you can make annotations on PDFs or web page materials. Next, this might sound counterintuitive, but you will need to take out your phone. Your phone is an excellent tool, so maybe silence your notifications or turn your phone into do not disturb mode, but keep it with you because this will help you look up vocabulary as you read. It will help you look up references. So if the article talks about some historical event or it mentions a person and you don't know what that is, you can look it up. And along with your phone, make sure that you have a writing tool handy so that you can make those annotations. So if you're working on paper, this is going to be your highlighter and a pen. If you're working on a digital annotation, you're going to have your computer or your tablet that you're using. And then also check the time or set a timer for the recommended reading time suggested by your instructor. In online education, many instructors will suggest how long you should spend reading a text. If you haven't been provided with a time expectation, what you can do is you can reflect on what course you're taking and how many units that is. And then along with this reading and other assignments that you are assigned for homework, you can use your credit hour time to help you chunk out and divide how long you want to spend on each activity. Once you know the time that you want to spend, set yourself a timer. Don't let this pressure you. Instead, use this as a tool to balance your workload. If you are advised to spend 60 to 90 minutes reading, set a timer for 60 minutes. When that timer goes off, if you are not finished with the reading, take a moment to pause and see what you have left. You'll have 30 minutes left and see how much you can finish in that last 30 minutes. If you didn't finish in the time that was recommended, bring that up during your next class session. Speak with your classmates, speak with your professor, because it could be that all of your classmates are experiencing something similar and your instructor needs to adjust their expectations. So use this timer as a tool to help you. Once you are prepared in mind and body and in space and time, you will begin the first phase of the reading process, which is pre-reading. Pre-reading a text comes in two kind of forms. Firstly, you will want to pre-read for the content of the text, and then secondly, for the context. So let's start by looking at the content first. When we scan for the content, what we want to do is look at each and every page of the text. We want to notice the title, the section formatting, subtitles or subheadings. We want to make a mental note of bold or italic text. We want to see if we can spot quotations, lists, images, charts, works cited, anything that stands out from the page. Scanning over the content of each page helps you become familiar with what you are about to engage with. Next, after you have a glance at what you're working with, predict how much time you might need. Predict how difficult this text will be. Predict what kinds of themes and topics you will encounter. And maybe make note of those three topics in your notes that you're taking. Before you launch into the text itself, after you've predicted kinds of the themes and topics that you'll engage with, reflect on your existing knowledge about the materials, themes, and topics. So take a minute to ask, what am I bringing to this text? We can think of the text as a two-way street. You will be receiving information, but you will also be applying your experiences and your knowledges as you make sense of what you read. Next, we will want to search for the context of the source. Begin by looking for information about the author, the publication date, and the publishing format. So see if you can find the author's name, or if this is an institution or a corporation, what is their name? See if you can find the publication date. It might just be a copyright year, or you might be provided with an entire date. You might notice if it was published and then updated. So make notes of those, and then also consider the publishing format. So if you are reading a web page, this should be expected to be very approachable. If you are reading like an article from a magazine, this might require a little bit more deep thinking to really engage with. An article from a magazine might require a longer attention span. And then if you're reading an article from a scholarly journal or from a scholarly source, you can expect that you're going to need much more intellectual engagement. You'll need sustained attentive focus. You might need to look up a lot of vocabulary words or a lot of references. So the format of the source will have a big impact on how much it demands of you as a reader. Look for related historical events. So if it's published during the World War I or II, if it's published before or after slavery, if it's published before or after the 21st century even, look and see if you can think of any historical events that might have been influencing the source as you know it. So draw from your own knowledge, the history that you learned in K-12, the history that you've experienced during your lifetime, and reflect to see if maybe that kind of context might be meaningful for the source. Think about global or cultural context for this source. Can you tell what nation this source was written in? Can you tell if this source is specific to one kind of culture or ethnic group? And think about how that background context might influence the content that you're provided with and the perspectives and points of view that you encounter. If you, during your preview of the content, if you didn't recognize any of the keywords or vocabulary terms that were big and bold and front and center, take a few seconds to look those up. If you spend 10 or 15 minutes just typing in keywords or dates or author names into your phone, into your web search engine before you dig into the reading, you might feel so much more prepared and so much more confident as you move through the text itself. So let's take a minute to pause and check in, look at your notes that you've been writing so far. Do you have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to hear more about? Can you share from your perspective when you begin the reading process? Do you sometimes do pre-reading activities of your own? Do you preview the text? Do you do any kind of searching for background context? I'm sure the class would love to hear whatever kind of reading processes for pre-reading we're already bringing into the mix. So if you would like, type down a comment or so, and then let's move on as we move toward the reading part of the pre-reading, rereading, and rereading process. Active and responsive annotation will kind of be broken down into two phases. Firstly, we want to annotate to comprehend the text. And then secondly, we want to annotate to engage with the text analytically. So let's look at those two types of annotations. Well, first we'll point out that when your teacher ever says read, he or she always means annotate. Read and annotate. When you read your assigned text, always have some kind of annotation tool handy. It could be a pen, it could be a highlighter, it could be these little sticky flags, anything that you can use to mark your text. Okay, now we will dig in to annotating for comprehension. First, the most common annotation for comprehension is highlighting. We want to highlight important claims or statements. Next, another great tool for annotation is circling. We might circle keywords. We might circle new vocabulary that we've never heard of before. And then when we look back at the text, those circled areas will call our attention quickly. We might label our text to classify specific details. So this is more advanced, but it will help us engage at a college level. We might say this is the claim that the author is making. So we have practice in our writing so far in this class. We have practice making our own claims. So this will help us to identify when the author is making a claim. As readers, we'll say this is somebody making a clear and specific claim. And then we might label when we see their evidence. So an evidence can be examples, quotations from the sources that they're referring to. They might narrate and tell a story to support their claim. So when we see a claim, we should expect to see some evidence, and we can use labeling to break up those parts of a text. Next, we might see context. So maybe the author is talking about what is happening in society. They might be referring to a year or a time period or an event in history. So we might take note and remind ourselves, here's the context. And then the significance. So the author will often tell us why their ideas are important, what can be gained or learned or developed after reading their ideas. So any statements about the impact or the effect or the results of their topic that they're talking about, we might make a little note on the side of our text where we might think this author is giving us the significance of their argument. And finally, another key detail to label is if the author ever asks you a rhetorical question. If the author is asking you as a reader to think more deeply about a problem or a solution, a possibility, a common occurrence. So anytime the author is questioning you to look inside at your experiences, your knowledge, your beliefs, your habits, you can write that down in the labeling on the side of your source. Next, a very effective way to annotate for comprehension is to gloss, or as we say, chunk. This is where we paraphrase a paragraph or a claim in our own words. So we might be reading and we might read a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, and we'll pause and we'll say, do I understand this in my own words? And then sort of summarize or paraphrase what you think the author has just said. That way, when you review, you don't have to read every word of the source again. You can just see your short paraphrase and you'll know what has been going on in the source. Next, we want to annotate our interpretations. This is where we might unpack the denotations and connotations of a phrase or a word. So if we are interpreting one word or one phrase, we might unpack the denotations by writing down the definition, by writing down what it means in simpler terms. Likewise, if we want to unpack the connotations of a word or a phrase, we might need to write down how this word or phrase suggests a deeper meaning. So is this word or phrase conveying a critical attitude? Is this an angry word, an angry phrase? Does the author represent feeling alarmed by a crisis, or are they representing feeling optimistic about some type of solution? Are they using sarcasm? Are they being ironic? So connotations are those deeper, unspoken meanings, whereas denotations are just the surface level, word for word meaning. And in order to comprehend a text, it is important to interpret both the surface level and the deeper level of some parts of the text. And finally, when we annotate to comprehend, it is especially important to make annotations in the parts that we do not comprehend. We need to mark passages that are confusing or hard to understand, because those are exactly the passages that will need to be brought up into the following class discussion. So take a look at the notes that you just wrote down on this section and see that you have noted these types of tools: highlighting, circling, labeling, glossing or chunking, interpreting, the difference between interpreting denotations and connotations, and finally of making sure that you have written down question marks in your passage. And let's move on to annotating to respond and engage and analyze the source. One of the most natural ways to react while reading is to annotate with your impulsive responses or reactions. We might see terms like OMG, what, wrong, yes, wow, or LOL. You might encounter any number of surprising, funny, shocking, disagreeable, thoughtful, agreeable phrases and details in any source that you read. Even though this is an academic course and we're reading academic texts, don't shut yourself off from your immediate reactions and your immediate responses. All of these types of small, short annotations are great ways to react and respond and dig into the text. We might also want to connect with the text. So we can fill in examples that support or refute the claims that you see inside the source. So for example, if you want to support or build onto something you read, you might write an annotation that begins saying, yes, like, and then you fill in your example. Or you might want to connect by refuting or contradicting something that you saw in the text. So maybe this is an old text, or maybe it's a perspective that you don't agree with. So they can make a claim and you can say, no, except for these instances. Or you could say, unless this happens, then your claim is wrong. So you can talk back and forth with the text. You can agree, you can disagree, you can have a mixed response. You might also want to make links and connections between the text that you're reading from and then other texts, other topics, or other themes that this reminds you of. And this can come from something you've read and experienced all throughout your K-12 education. You guys are bringing with you a huge body of information that you have encountered during public school or private school, just during schooling. And then not to mention that, but your lives that you've lived through, so many topics or themes or events, ways of life that you can connect into the text. And connections and links can be not only this is similar to, but this is the opposite of. So links to other texts, other topics, other themes. You could even think of texts as TV shows or movies or songs that you've heard. And then we can dig even deeper to analyze the text. So when we analyze, we can do two things. Firstly, we can infer the underlying assumptions of a claim. So we might say that this is a conservative point of view. This is a progressive point of view. Or we might likewise say, in order to be saying this, this author must believe these types of ideas, or this author must have a pessimistic outlook. We can think of those kinds of underlying assumptions, hidden, buried types of assumptions or beliefs or biases that are motivating these claims. Another way that we can analyze is by suggesting the extended implications of a claim. So extended implications are what would happen if. So we could use phrases like, if this is true, then this would be the result. So if this claim is right, then these things will happen. Or we could say something like, we read a claim, the author has said something, we want to dig deeper, and we might say, well, if this is the case, then that would mean these consequences or these follow-up results. So we might just react on the surface. We might connect with our personal examples. We might make links to other things we've encountered, or we might analyze the underlying assumptions or the extended implications as we respond to a text. Next, let's think of some reading questions that we can use to engage with the text along the way. As you read, you can ask yourself to better understand what is the issue, controversy, problem, or debate in this text. Those types of topics will help you understand what idea is this author engaging with. And then, what are the sides of the argument that are represented? Is there a pro and a con? Is there a problem and a solution? Is there multiple conflicting viewpoints or multiple possibilities for moving on during this issue, controversy, problem, or debate? Those types of details would be very important to keep track of to ensure that you comprehend the text. Another question you can ask is, what kinds of actions, thoughts, or attitudes is this author advocating or attacking? So does this author want you as a reader or readers as a society to start engaging in specific actions or start considering specific thoughts or adopting specific attitudes? Or likewise, does this author want you as a reader or all readers as a society to stop participating in specific actions, thoughts, or attitudes? Try and really dig into understanding exactly what this author wants from his or her readers. Next, to dig deeply into specific claims, you can target a sentence and ask, what does this sentence mean on the surface? So what is the denotation, the surface level meaning of this claim or phrase or sentence? Then, what might it mean if you look more closely at specific keywords and details? So maybe you might highlight a sentence that really stands out to you. And then you might circle specific keywords or specific details that really emphasize one minute detail of this author's meaning. When it comes to writing about the text or engaging with the text, this might be a key quotation that you use to write and respond to the source. Next, you can ask yourself, what kind of structure or what kind of pattern of reasoning is this author using? So when you gloss or chunk or paraphrase an entire paragraph, or maybe 2 paragraphs that you've just read, can you use a conjunction to form a compound sentence which really emphasizes and captures the structure or the pattern of reasoning from the source that you are reading? So we might recall some common patterns of development are definition or defining and classifying what something means, talking about the cause and effect, talking about compare and contrast. So compare and contrast could be comparing 2 viewpoints. It could be talking about before and after, like a notable change has taken place. Maybe the author is using a problem and solution pattern of development or a sequence, chronological process development. So see if you can capture that kind of higher level structuring when you understand what the author is talking about. So take a moment now to review this last chunk of notes that you've been taking and ask if there are any questions or things that you would like clarified when it comes to the reading phase of the reading process. And likewise, use the discussion space to share what you like to do when you read. Do you have a favorite type of annotations you like to make? Do you have anything that you would want to share about like your reading process? Do you have some key ideas that you like to keep in mind or ask yourself while you're reading through something? Go ahead and share anything that comes to mind. Share from your experience, share from things you've learned in past English classes, or maybe advice that you've received from other people. Make a few reactions and comments, and then when you're ready, we will move on to the next phase of the rereading process. So this is the part after we finish pre-reading and reading. We're going to follow up by using this text for studying to write something. We're going to use our text for engaging in discussions and other types of assignments. So the first part of the rereading process involves scanning back through what you have written. So firstly, reread your highlighted claims and passages along with the notes that you wrote in the margins. So you don't reread the whole text, but you reread the gloss, you reread questions that you may have asked or labels that you've used to classify and categorize elements of the text. Take follow-up notes. Like if there was a part that was confusing for you that you haven't marked before, make sure you mark it. If upon reflection you notice these are the most important parts, use like a star or an asterisk to remind yourself, you know, these 3 parts are the most important, or this one claim looks like the thesis statement. Or you can use numbering as a way to help you outline the source. So if you notice this was the claim, and then as you read and you reflect on what you read, you notice that there were, 4 supporting details. You might number them 1, 2, 3, 4, because they might be spread out across a couple of pages. But if you have, claim 3 details, claim 2 details, it will help you begin to form a structure of that text in your mind. And then finally, if while you are reading, you are circling references or vocabulary terms, and then while reading, you didn't stop and look those up, take a few minutes at the end of reading to define those things that you have marked. So take your phone out, write down those little definitions. That way this source is more clear to you when you study it again. After you scan through your source, you may want to have taken notes on a separate piece of paper. If you had not taken notes while you were reading, but you would like to take notes afterward, you can go ahead and practice some of our note-taking guides that we learned about earlier in the semester. So there was TIPS, Koala, the SPQ3R notes, which you are, after this lesson, you are more prepared to complete, having gone through the entire reading process. or MAPS notes, especially if you notice that your source had sort of provocative use of language, some problems like bias or being outdated. So after you've scanned your source, after you've taken any notes that you wish to take, you will be ready to engage with the text. After you pre-read, read, and reread the source, you can begin to discuss and write about the source. You will use your annotations on the text and your notes on separate papers to reflect on and connect to the source during those follow-up engagements. When you reflect on the source, you might ask, why do you agree or disagree with the arguments and ideas that have been presented? You might ask why you like or dislike the writing style or something else about the text. When you connect this text to other texts, you might wonder if you saw overlapping themes or topics. You might ask, is it similar to something that you have read before, something that you have heard before or watched before? You might ask, does it contradict ideas that you have encountered in the past? And then when you connect this text to your own knowledge and experiences, you might use your background knowledge to refute or critique ideas in the text. So maybe this text is being written by somebody who does not share the same perspective, experiences, and life views that you do. So you can talk back to the text by refuting it or critiquing it or offering counterpoints. You can also use examples from contemporary real life to better understand outdated or abstract concepts. Coming from an older time period, like the 1990s, before, internet and technology was really common and prevalent, or at the very beginning of the early 2000s when technology was really beginning to change the shape of everyday life. Whereas in our current day and age, we're living in 2020s plus, and we have a much different perspective. So maybe we might read something that talks about some alarm or some crisis or some, terrible things that might happen, but we can reflect now from our contemporary experience to see if those predictions did or did not come true. And then also another way to connect with the text by using your own knowledge and experience is by using the text as a starting point for building knowledge and experience. So researching more information about references from the text. So did the author refer to topics, themes, ideas? Did the author refer to background, history, and context? Did the author refer to other authors? If there was something that you didn't know about, you can use this source as a way to build your knowledge by researching more information about those types of references. Okay, so now that we have done a really detailed overview of the entire reading process, we will be better prepared to practice these skills as we read more college-level advanced sources as we progress into the semester. So please remember, ask questions about the lesson, share your own tips, your own experiences, and your own practices that you use during reading. And we will get through learning these new concepts and skills together as a class. I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.